Good morning, everybody. I would love to start with some words in German, but you know, I can't beat Fats German. That's not going to work any. Yeah, it's not going to work anyhow. So that's cool. I speak a couple of words of German because I live in Belgium, Antwerp. That's not too far from here. Does anybody know Antwerp, Belgium? Ever been there? Go visit. They call it a city, but actually it's sort of village more. Like it's got only 400,000 people. That's not that much. Still, it's the second city of Belgium. So I'm fully wired. You don't know. Funny face. So. No, I'm fine. As long as you can hear me. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm really happy to be here. I've known Vaart for a while and Hagen, and thank you, Stefan, for organizing this. I'm going to have to apologize to Stefan as an organizer because he's seen my talk already last week. Was anybody else last week at Scrum Day Germany in Stuttgart? Anybody by accident? Besides Stefan? No? Oh, cool. So there's still some people that I can try to please. Luckily, I never do the same thing twice anyhow. So it's ganz cool. The Karlsruher Entwicklertag. So first of all, it's 3 days. I thought it's like Entwicklertag. It's like Entwicklertag. It's fascinating, right? That's sort of like what the IT industry is about. We promise to be 1 day and then we take 3 days. and then we call that Agile. Yeah, but one part of those 3 days is the Agile day. The rest is still sort of what maybe Vaart was hinting at. Sort of. Do you understand the word water scrum fall? So we do waterfall, but you know, somewhere in the middle we claim to do something that looks like Scrum. Yeah, things like that. Okay, cool. So Entwicklertag, that's really fascinating. So a developer day. So I would love to do a little check. I don't know how it works in Germany, but still. Can everybody please stand? Cool. So this is supposed to be a developer day, right? So let's take a broad definition of what developer means. Developing means coding, testing, programming, analyzing, whatever. Whoever is not involved in actual development, please sit. So if you're a real developer, you can just stand. Okay, cool. So you live up to the promise that this is actually an Entwicklertag. That's cool. So from everybody who's standing now, who is not doing Scrum, they can sit. If you're not doing Scrum, you can sit. Cool. So we now know who are actual developers and who's doing Scrum. Okay. The people that actually like to do Scrum, they can sit. Okay.
What's with me?
Yeah. You're the only one that has honesty. So thank you for that. What we see, you all know Uncle Bob Martin, right? So he's got this famous statement saying the land that Scrum forgot. Does anybody know that statement? So it's sort of a recurring sort of frustration of Uncle Bob saying, Scrum fine, Scrum took over this beautiful world called Agile, and nobody knows how to do proper development within Scrum. So that one guy over there that was really honest, that's what we see happening a lot. People actually involved in development, actual developers, they just don't like Scrum because it's pushed on them and so on. And that sort of makes my heart bleed. Because the roots of Scrum are in software development, and if you don't have proper development in place, in a way you're not doing Scrum. It's not just about following the ceremonies. So that's something that sort of makes my heart bleed, and that's why I'm happy to speak at an Entwicklertag. Real development people. I did sort of the same talk beginning of May in Belgium. Imagine sometimes I do work in Belgium too, or speak in Belgium. For a sort of Microsoft-oriented event, talked about same thing, what is Scrum and so on. And that's good because I get an opportunity to express my love and how I care for software developers. And Scrum is often forgetting that. And you've got all these Scrum police type of people around that think they know how you should build software. Well, they don't. Well, that's fascinating. So, the future present of Scrum. How does that resonate with you, that sort of title? Last week somebody said, it's just a strange title, that's all. Okay. Any thoughts? Any maybe expectations on the future present of Scrum, the title? Anybody? So I've tried to put in sort of two words, future and present. That means leaving out past. You know, everything in Scrum Agile should be about the future. We should always look forward, even within Scrum. Sprint planning is about looking forward, but even a review retrospectives are about looking forward. Too many people get stuck in the past all the time. So, we felt like this is a great time to talk about sort of the future present of Scrum, because Scrum has reached a certain age. Does anybody know how old Scrum actually is today? No? No? So Scrum is actually turning 21 years old. So Scrum for the first time was officially presented sort of to the public in 1995. After this strange guy, Jeff Sutherland, had crazy ideas based on his military background and working in banks and in the medical field, and then joined forces with Ken Schwaber. So in 1995 they presented Scrum for the first time officially. So last year Scrum turned 21, so this year Scrum is about to turn 20, last year 20. This year Scrum is about to turn 21. Wow, I always use this type of thing to say, oh, okay. Whatever. I thought you Germans were good at technique. But yeah, this is modern technique, right? Yeah, okay, cool. It's not just building a car. Sorry for that. So Scrum is turning 21. I always use that to say maybe we should stop calling Scrum a hype. Last year I was contacted by a company, even in the Netherlands, sort of the top #1 country with regards to Scrum adoption in the world. And there was a sort of IT, university, academy type of thing. And they were like, oh, the head of, new head of the academy, oh, should we keep doing that sort of hype thing called Scrum and Agile? Should we still offer Scrum courses? That's a fascinating statement, because it's been around for 20 years. Now imagine, it's amazing. Scrum is also the case in Germany. I don't know how it is, but so in the Netherlands, Scrum is all over the place. Everybody's doing Scrum. It's not only in IT, it's also in the educational system. So does anybody know about Scrum? Have you heard about it? Cool. So it's from the Netherlands. They're doing Scrum in education for 16, 17, 18 years old students, pupils. They self-organize. They are given learning objectives, things they have to learn, and then they organize on how to learn that themselves. Right? Fascinating thing. And last week in Stuttgart, they were there, the people from Scrum. And if you want to join, there's some people in Stuttgart, you know them, some trainers, GP Bercher, who they're going to try and bring Scrum to Germany too. Imagine, Scrum in the educational system. 2 weeks ago, I wrote the foreword for a little sort of Scrum guide for people in the Netherlands that are bringing Scrum to the world of construction. So constructing buildings and housing projects and managing housing projects. So it's fascinating. Sort of Scrum is getting into a lot of other domains, not just IT or software development. Do a search on Amazon for the number of books on Scrum. Forget the books about sports, because that's not really counting. It's amazing how many books on Scrum there are. So it's really fascinating. What do you think is the #1 reason for this sort of, let's call it a success, right? It's been around for 20 years, everybody's doing it. What do you think is the #1 reason for the success of Scrum? Any ideas?
Satisfying us as developers. That is satisfying me.
Yeah, except yeah. Okay.
Simple.
So it's good for developers?
Yes.
Should be at least. Thank you, that's good.
Simple.
It's simple, yeah, okay, cool. Certainly also the fact that it's sort of in a way open. You don't have to pay for it. It's not, oh, before we can use the name Scrum, we have to pay a license and some things, so that's really good. And I think actually, like developers, I think the #1 reason for the success of Scrum is the people doing Scrum, the people using Scrum, employing Scrum, that simple thing called Scrum to solve their problems. So that's a big thank you from us Scrum people to all you guys for using Scrum, employing Scrum, doing it every day and again. And there's a lot of people that seem to keep doing it. So that's good. That's what made Scrum so young or old. I'm not sure, because you know what? I have no idea where Scrum is in its life cycle. But in a way, we're just passing, those teenage years are now behind us. We're turning 20, turning 21. Do you remember when you were 21? Maybe some people are still 21, but or 20. The older people like me, remember when you were 21. Did you know what the future would bring? Did you have any idea? Yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to plan this sort of in a Gantt chart and then make sure that I get my life under control. That's sort of not really happening. So really a big thank. There's a lot of people around the world that say they do Scrum. Depending on the source, this is one source, this is the recent version 1 survey. Does anybody know the state of Agile development version 1 report? Yeah. This is like, I don't know, a month ago or so. They do a 2-yearly survey. Every 2 years they do a survey around the world for people saying, hey, what sort of method do you actually apply? So you're calling yourself Agile, what do you do? And there's like 58% of all people, all teams worldwide saying we're doing Scrum, and even 10% more that are doing Scrum and extreme programming together. I so wish those were sort of the other way around, because that would mean that people would be doing actually, like Fout said, great engineering practices within Scrum. So 70% of all Agile teams worldwide say they're doing Scrum. I recently was talking to a guy from Forrester. He said, oh no, this is wrong, it's 90%. So sort of depending on the source, 70 to 90% of all people doing Agile worldwide say they're doing Scrum. That's really good. There's only one guy in the room that says, oh, I don't really like Scrum. There's probably more people, but lacking the honesty, I don't know. Does this all mean that we're done with Scrum? Somebody still doesn't like Scrum. Everybody says they're doing Scrum. Doesn't mean we're done with Scrum. It's over. We've been there. We've done that. Let's move on. Go for something new, like digital transformation. Let's create a new buzz, a new hype. Are we done with Scrum? Do you feel like you're done with Scrum? No? No's? Nobody's saying yes? Cool, otherwise this would have been the shortest talk I did ever. So if we're not done with Scrum, will you quickly think about what is your biggest challenge moving forward with Scrum? If we're not done with Scrum, there's still challenges. What is your number one challenge? So quickly take 1-2 minutes, I'll give you a little time box. Everything we do in Scrum is time boxed. Fascinating. So talk to your neighbors. Imagine you would have to talk. If you thought you were coming over here and just sit and listen for 1 hour, nope. So take 1-2 minutes and talk with your neighbors. What is your number one challenge? Your organization, your team, your department, whatever, moving forward with Scrum. What is bothering you? Yeah? Take a little bit of time for that. Okay, shall we? Okay, thank you. What are your challenges? Some challenges. What are you struggling with? What are you hoping for?
Taking Scrum from the development team to the company.
Okay, so embedding Scrum more inside of the organization and get Scrum accepted by management?
Management and sales understanding what they are really having inside their company for sales.
Okay, so understanding sort of the iterative incremental progress you have with Scrum and the lack of actual predictions you can make and the complexity.
Bringing this to the customer, telling the customer you won't have your release in 2 years and here's your list, but you're going to have impact with us in the next 1 to 3 years and you're going to get the product you need and require.
Okay, wow. Well, it's no longer about predictions, it's about actual collaboration.
Yes.
Okay. Other challenges you have with Scrum? Anybody?
With a transformed organization with 300-400 developers that work for one product into an organization that consists of 100 Scrum teams working for one product.
Okay. So scaling Scrum or Scrum in an environment of scaled development. Okay, more challenges?
Requirements engineering.
How to deal with requirements in Scrum? Yep.
Don't forget the values of Scrum.
The Scrum values.
That we not only dance the mechanics, like
Cargo called Scrum. Yeah, just following the ceremonies. We do a daily stand-up. We do in Scrum, right? Maybe there's more to it. Yeah, over here.
Establishing a real flow that is predictable and reliable is harder than it sounds in theory.
Yeah, so creating a sort of flow and still being, in a way, achieving some form of predictability without having to make predictions, which is very hard. Yeah.
Scrum output was fine, but innovative, but management and sales doesn't recognize them.
They're still stuck in sort of the industrial thinking. That has been dominating our world for way too long. Okay, a lot of challenges. Does everybody recognize those challenges? Yeah? Yeah?
I wanted to add dealing with legacy that is coming from a different world.
Oh yeah, legacy things that whatever language, but in general COBOL, that was developed a long time ago that nobody dares to touch anymore. And now we have to be agile. It has to change like every 2-3 weeks. Yeah. So there's still some challenges. Good. Conclusion. We're not done with Scrum. Now, of all those challenges you just mentioned, just little call for action. What are you trying to do about it? Or is everybody in your company just sort of sitting, complaining, whining, nobody's listening to us, so what are you doing about it? And what if you would try to involve your Scrum Masters? Now, Scrum Master, here's a real challenge we need you to solve for us. We're development people. We want to build increments of software. This is what is impeding us. Here's some impediments. Go do some useful work, dear Scrum Master. Or bring it up to your management. Hey, this is not really helpful what you're doing. Always messing up our priorities, messing up the product backlog and so on. So just maybe call for action. Try to do something about it, not just sit, complain, whine, and so on. So we see indeed a lot of challenges with Scrum. Let me go through them quickly. The most important challenge is sort of accepting, understanding that it's all about people. It's a human activity. Creating software is done by people. It's also done for people, for users. So we are pretty unpredictable ourselves, both in developing as well as in accepting and using software. So that's cool, that's fascinating. So software development, certainly agile software development starts and ends with people. It's all about people. So that's fascinating. So a couple of weeks ago, also last week, I was at Nordea. Nordea is a big Danish bank. They're the second bank in Denmark and they're the biggest bank in the Nordics, so across Sweden and so on. And they're engaging in a large-scale sort of agile software development effort in recreating their core bank application because they want to move away from legacy. And instead of trying to update what they have, they're trying to they're going to try to rewrite the complete thing for the second time. So first time they lacked sort of business involvement, so they're trying to solve that now. So I know sort of 4 delivery streams, each stream has 100 people, and they will be doing that for 3 to 5 years. So pretty big, too big for me to comprehend. Still, I did a workshop of 3 hours over there, talking about things I've seen in the Netherlands with big companies, Philips, ING, ABN AMRO, KLM, other big companies that sort of in the Netherlands are embracing Agile. And they wanted to know, hey, what's happening over there? What are the lessons learned? Because, you know, we all want to, in a way, copy what everybody else is doing. That's why everybody's going for the Spotify model right now. Do you see that in Germany happening? Everybody's now sort of copying the Spotify model. Whenever you see the term squad pop up, you know that somebody's copying the Spotify model, right? It's still a Scrum team in a way, but still. And by the end of that 3 hours, very intense, very, very highly collaborative, very, very big with big shop managers and some sort of lower whatever types of managers. And really fascinating. So, and the main lesson learned I shared with him by the end of the session was, it's all about people. Because what I've seen in the Netherlands with a couple of big companies, so they first, they were doing Scrum, and then after a year they were getting bored with just Scrum, so they had to be DevOps by then. And then they had to be like, bring in Safe, and then now they're copying the Spotify model, and that took them like 4 or 5 years, lots of evolutions. And in a way it was all fixed a lot on process. And after 5 years, some of those companies find, damn, it's still about people. We've been forgetting the fact that it's about people, so we have to allow people to improve their skills, get mastery, train, and so on. So that's a bit of a pity. So I told Nordea, what if you would start with people and not just find out in 3, 4, 5 years that it's all about people? That's just a waste of time. So it starts with people. But then there's this thing at Scrum.org we used to call professional Scrum. Yes, you can follow the ceremonies of Scrum. Oh yeah, we do a daily Scrum, and then we're doing Scrum, right? Maybe this even with regards to ceremonies more than that. But you know what? Living, following those ceremonies while understanding, like somebody said, the Scrum values, also the Agile values, the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto, the empiricism of Scrum, that's a very important foundation of Scrum. So understanding the principles and the values of Scrum will certainly help. But absolutely also room for technical excellence. Have proper engineering in place, product development practices, standards, agreements, whatever. Very important. In a way, you're not doing empiricism, because empiricism is all about inspection, adaptation, right? How can you inspect the way you're building a product and the product that you've been building if you've got nothing to inspect against, if you have no standards in place, no agreements in place? So if you understand not only the ceremonies of Scrum, but certainly the empirical foundation of Scrum, you will understand that you need actual engineering standards in place. Otherwise, in a way, you're not doing Scrum. So that's sort of what we call professional Scrum, instead of just ceremonial or mechanic, whatever called. The most beautiful term I know for just following Scrum blindly, not knowing what you're doing, is zombie Scrum. Oh, you got sprint planning now. I have no idea what we're going to do, but we're going into sprint planning. So just try to move away from just that sort of zombie Scrum, understand the principles and the values of Scrum, the empiricism, and certainly give people, development people like yourself, room for technical excellence. To not just build great products, but also develop themselves. Very important. So that's what we call a professional Scrum. There's this foolish idea that we have in Scrum, like Vat mentioned, of creating releasable software every sprint. So creating actually done increments. There's this product ownership stuff. Maybe that's with requirements management. One of the challenges you mentioned, having really great product owners in place and not just proxy people, representatives, and like, oh, product owner is just the new title that we want to strive for. I used to be called a project manager, whatever. Now I want to be a product owner because that's a new status I want to achieve in Scrum. So really good product ownership is certainly a challenge. Scaling Scrum, meaning employing Scrum at a larger scale, where at that scale you're using the effectiveness of Scrum and you've not just scaled up your dysfunctions. That's why we say maximize Scrum first. Get a sort of professional Scrum in place first and then start scaling up. Start small. That's my biggest fear for Nordea. They got now one delivery stream up and running of 100 people, and they want to, by the end of this year, they want to have the 3 additional streams up and running. It's my opinion, just too fast. Has anybody seen by accident, so Jeff Sutherland recently published a paper at the Harvard Business Review. It's called Embracing Agile, sort of lessons for management. One of the lessons for management is start small, then grow. We keep saying that, everybody keeps ignoring that, that's fine too. One of the other fascinating lessons, by the way, with regards to one of your challenges is how can you really, as a manager, screw up the adoption or the implementation of Scrum by all these managers thinking they still need to manage. That's a way to screw up Scrum. Managers thinking they still need to manage stuff. So maximize Scrum before you scale up Scrum. And certainly there's a challenge in sort of embedding Scrum in the enterprise. What I call upstream adoption, meaning management accepting, understanding Scrum, sales departments, marketing departments, and so on. So, oh my God, there's a lot of challenges. This guy has a problem. Houston, we have a problem. What now? What now? Too many challenges. Oh, information overload. I'm locked down. I have no idea what to do now, right? So, what I like most about Scrum is what Vaart mentioned, the simplicity of Scrum. Simplicity is the ultimate tool to tackle complexity and challenges and problems and so on, so that's cool. So if it starts with people, it starts and ends with people, what makes people really work really well is give them a goal, an objective, a purpose, something to work against, to self-organize against. Don't tell them how to do that, give them challenges, give them goals, which then turn into opportunities. Now the ultimate goal of Scrum is this. This is what we'll ask people to do. This is a statement I launched like over a year ago, just because there was some indications out there, and also because at Scrum the Talk I was, like Vaart said, responsible, whatever, accountable, whatever you want to call it, for the assessments that we have in place. So who's got an assessment of Scrum the Talk, by the way? Professional Scrum Master level 1, Professional Scrum Product Owner, who's got an assessment? Or accreditation? Okay, cool. Does anybody have the PSD certificate? At least a couple of people, so Professional Scrum Developer level 1. Okay, not too many. Cool, you're all developers, right? Not saying you have to. But there was a lot of indications from our assessments also out there in the field, people contacting us saying, oh, you know what, we're going to forget that definition of done because it's not an artifact, it's not even part of Scrum. Ooh, that's strange. That's fascinating because we thought Scrum, done was pretty crucial in Scrum. It's almost at the heart of Scrum, so that we came up with a statement. So let's investigate this statement a little bit more. So this is about all of these challenges. Let's go back to the essence of Scrum. The essence of Scrum is people, and the purpose, the goal we give people, the objective is, hey, what about creating a done increment and take no more than 2, 3, 4 weeks to do that and keep doing that. That's a challenge, that's a goal, that's an objective, something to work against, so that's really cool. And it's because a long time ago in the past, this is how we thought we should work. The sort of industrial model, it's sort of an open system. We give input into the system, we process the thing. It's very predictable, we create an output, and that's it, end of story. And in order to get control, we start linking a lot of those sort of open systems, and that seemed to not work. And there's lots of evidence that it doesn't work. That's why Scrum created this, meaning we need to close the loops. We need to create feedback. Regular feedback, and the minimal feedback that Scrum creates is at least by the end of every what we call a sprint, feedback is going back into sort of the input so that we can continuously inspect and adapt. Hopefully you understand that the main input into Scrum is what you call that product backlog, and maybe that's the essence of requirements management in Scrum, making sure you've got a proper product backlog, it's well ordered, it's not too exhaustive and so on. It certainly ties into the challenge of product ownership. And the goal of, let's say, the system called Scrum is to produce a valuable increment by the end of every sprint, so that we can feed back lessons from that valuable increment, that we get over that valuable increment back into the system, and at the same time hopefully can release that valuable increment because it should be valuable for end users, not just for internal purposes. It's only valuable if you can bring it to your customers and your customers' users are willing to pay for it. That's sort of Scrum, right? Product backlog going into Scrum, and the result is every sprint a valuable increment. Yeah? There's at least 2 feedback loops formally in Scrum, sprint review, retrospective. Inside of the system, we've got this daily Scrum. That's a small feedback loop. I would hope that you have proper development engineering standards in place, because maybe test-driven development, acceptance test-driven development, certainly continuous integration, a lot of testing happening within the sprint, all feedback loops within the sprint. That will help you build that valuable increment. And then certainly, hopefully, the ability to actually go to market, not just every 5-6 months. Oh yeah, we're on fixed releases, we do 2 releases a year. That means you're lacking the opportunity to close the feedback loop with your customers, your users, and learn from that, and feed that back into your product backlog and build a better system. So that's sort of high level, looking back at the system called Scrum, product backlog, Scrum, and the goal is, or the result is a valuable increment. Now, that's fairly easy, it seems, with only one team. So you've got one product backlog, you've hopefully one team, at least one product owner only. You never know what people do, but still. And the goal is for each sprint to deliver a releasable increment. Yeah? Now, the importance of that increment is not just merely because Scrum says so, because we're in a highly unpredictable world. This is what your customers will experience. The goal of an increment is to be valuable for your users, so you can put it out there into production, into the market, so that you can learn. Maybe your customers will buy, you get a return, you get a lot of insights and learning and feedback from that. That's why we say in Scrum you need to produce an increment by the end of every 2, 3, 4 weeks, so that you can go out to the market and check in with your users on how this is working. Fairly easy, although with one team. But what if you have to do this with multiple teams, a lot of teams, whatever? Well, you know what? Those simple basic rules of Scrum, they don't change. You still have one product backlog going into the system. You've got at least one product owner having total accountability over that one product backlog, because one product, one backlog, one owner. You might have distributed product ownership to the teams. That doesn't take away the idea that we want to have one product owner taking the final decisions over that one product backlog. And the goal of the system Scrum, regardless of how many teams make up the system, the goal of the system is to produce releasable increments, valuable increments. That means with multiple teams, at least they have to be integrated every sprint again and again and again. Again, because this is about your customer's experience. It's about using Scrum as a tool, just a mean to achieve business agility. This is business agility, the ability to get new software, a new release out on the market every 2, 3, 4 weeks. That will make you agile from a business perspective, from an enterprise perspective, on the market, with regards to your competition. And this is still the goal of Scrum. And this is independent of how many teams are actually part of the system Scrum. The rules of Scrum don't change because you do it at a big scale. One input, working one product backlog, one increment every 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then maybe the biggest challenge is reorganize towards that goal. Not let existing structures impede you in that. So it's sort of just small back to basics. Now, if you think about this basic system, simple system called Scrum, can you quickly, again, enjoy some conversation amongst yourself about, in my latest project, my latest team, whatever, my latest development, the product I'm involved with, did you actually deliver an increment by the end of a sprint, by your last sprint? Did you do that by the end of every sprint? And was your increment actually releasable, meaning you could put it into production? If your product owner would have liked it and said, oh, this is functionally really cohesive, this makes sense, I want to get this out there. So again, take 2 minutes with the, sort of your self-organized, self-formed team and share some experiences. Yeah, we produced an increment. No, we didn't. So take 2 minutes for that. So, cool. It's funny observation always. If that guy is there, that guy from Belgium thinks we're going to talk to each other, no. Anyway, thank you for all the great conversations. I like the noise. I like the buzz. So, who's producing an increment that is actually releasable by the end of every sprint? Some people. Every 2 sprints. Okay. I'm not saying that you have to produce an increment that is released, but is it releasable? Every 2 sprints, you guys producing increment? Anybody else? Some guys over there? Cool. What is the most difficult in, because there's so few people in this room that are actually producing a releasable increment, what is so difficult about that then? What's so difficult?
Question is, what is the increment? Something with really user value, or only something internal functional, or something really user can see and employ or can
Okay. What does releasable mean? So in the last Scrum Guide, that was 2013, there was a change of words. So they changed the word shippable into releasable. Any idea why? Because there were too many teams using that. Oh yeah, it has to be shippable. Means we can ship to the QA department. So we made it a little bit more clear. We said, oh, let's change shippable for releasable so that people understand it's about business agility. You want to be agile on your market against your competition. So something that you can internally ship to another department, that was not really the goal of Scrum. That was not really how we intended it. So releasable meaning actually being able to put it out there on the market. Now what we see happening, so we're doing this, and I've been talking to Jeff last week, he's been doing this at Silicon Valley, asking people about, is your increment actually, do you have an increment, and is it actually releasable? And it's like in a room of, I don't know how many people are here, like 200, I don't know. There's like maybe 5, 6, maybe 10 people saying that. No more than 10% ever says, oh, we can produce actually releasable increment. So cool. You thought you were out of impediments. So get your Scrum Master to work on this. So does your Scrum Master know that what is impeding you as a team to produce actually releasable software? Oh yeah, but we can't do QA work, we can't access the testing service or whatever. So that sounds like a really cool impediment to resolve. So get your Scrum Masters to fix this for you. Involve your management again. Or just sit around waiting for other people to solve your problem. Or just do something about it. Try to take some action. So it's really fascinating. So that's always been the goal of Scrum. It still is. So thinking about the future present of Scrum, it's still the same, producing done software. Because we want to be business agile or agile at the business level. Does everybody have a definition of done in place, by the way? Who has a definition of done? Good start, but not everybody. Although that's sort of the start, right? If you want to understand what it means to have a releasable done piece of software, a piece of product by the end of every sprint, you must understand, have an agreement of what it means to be done, right? So if people come up to me and say, oh, we're not having definition of done because it's not an artifact. Oh, I thought we had 3 artifacts, product backlog, sprint backlog, and a done increment. So I think done is actually in one of the artifacts. Maybe not as visible as you would hope it be, but still it's there. So it all starts with the definition of done. Because definition of done should give you at least sort of the lowest level of transparency you want to get out of a definition of done is understanding what is the state of our increment by the end of the sprint. So that will give you an indication, is our increment actually releasable or not? And that's something you might want to improve upon. It's a very good, interesting topic to talk about at your retrospective. What is impeding us as a team to actually produce releasable software, to have a definition of done in place that covers all work to create releasable software? So that's the goal. And we've got this, who remembers the Scrum but model? Yeah, some grinning. You were doing Scrum but you're not doing this and so on. So we're trying to move on a little bit. Now that like 90% of all teams in the world are doing Scrum, maybe that's no longer saying you're doing Scrum, but helping them improve on how they do Scrum. So that's why we call it Scrum and. Yes, you're doing Scrum if you have a definition of done in place. And you know what? You're going to get a lot more out of Scrum. Your benefits will be a lot higher. If your definition of done doesn't only encompass the fact that it has to be coded, also tested, integrated, and it's actually releasable. Meaning, if your product owner would see value in your increment by the end of the sprint, just to push on a button and it's live. So it's sort of pre-deployed, deployable, whatever. It's releasable. And imagine that it would actually be valuable. So it starts by having a definition of done. Definition of done will show you the state of the increment by the end of every sprint at the sprint review. Well, this is the work we've done on the increment. In order to be really releasable, this work still needs to be done. So that's that sort of Müll, sort of undone work, a German word, Müll, waste, garbage. So that's where's the garbage in it? So, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And then think in terms of predictability, like one of your challenges, right? You want to be predictable. Well, start by creating done software and eliminate sort of the biggest source of unpredictability that you might have in Scrum. Having undone work by the end of every sprint. You have no idea how much work, when it's going to be done, who's going to do it, and all the rework that comes out of that work that you sort of encounter when things are being shipped to the QA department, that will just fire back at you. So that's the goal of a definition of done. So let's explore this idea of done and definition of done a little bit more. So it starts by definition of done. This is one of the questions we had in our assessments. So I'm just giving away a question of the assessment. Imagine, yeah, you now will all pass, right? It's just the most difficult one. So this is one of the things that got us thinking last year. So so for the past 3 years, I've been working with Scrum Org with beautiful, great, intelligent, creative trainers, 160 people across the globe. And we've been presenting this with this question. And who knows the Scrum Guide? So just talked about last update, 2030. Okay, cool. There will be a new update in July. Please go have a look. There's a webinar planned. Sort of spoiling the experience a little bit. The main update of the Scrum will be the addition of the Scrum values. Isn't that cool? Just no longer the ceremonies, just the addition of the Scrum values. So the 5 values of Scrum will be added to the Scrum Guide. Now in our community, we've got these brilliant people that know the Scrum Guide by heart. They can say like every sentence, every word, they know every detail, they know where all of the commas and the question marks are and so on. And then we present them with this question. So can you just, with your little team, take 1 minute and think about this question? What would your answer be? Who creates the definition of done? Just a, I know, 1 minute time box. Instead of giving away the answer, let me show you how we responded to all those Scrum Guide freaks out there, even Scrum police people that know, oh, I know, Scrum dictators, whatever. They know, oh, we have to follow the Scrum Guide. This is what the Scrum Guide says. Now, I like to focus a lot on the why of things, the purpose of things. It's not just because it's sort of a rule in the Scrum Guide that we have to follow it. That's my duck, yeah, it's a little friend. So it's about understanding the why. So there's some people also last week at Scrum Day Germany in Stuttgart say, oh, I thought I knew the Scrum Guide. So there was one trainer in the audience while looking at this, quickly looking up the Scrum Guide. Is this true? Is this true? And it was actually true. Imagine, I'm not standing here lying and show you a quote from the Scrum Guide. That's not really from the Scrum Guide. Imagine that. So there's a why to this. What is actually the why? If software is so crucial for your company, it's even critical, and no matter what industry you're in, whether it's banking, automotive, or car production, whatever, it all thrives on software these days, sort of like Vaat says. It all thrives on software. So if software is so crucial for your company, you're building software products, you're maintaining them, sustaining them, whatever, you have to keep them up and running, produce new versions, wouldn't it be very appropriate to expect an organization to think about qualities of your product, what done means for your organization, and to be honest, not just leave it up to the individual teams to make up a definition of done? That's sort of the idea behind this. Let's investigate this a little bit. So let's think in terms of definition of done. Those are two products, right? Very similar, sort of. Yeah. Which product has the best definition of done, do you think? When creating it, which one had the best definition of done? Who thinks this one has the best definition of done? Vaat? Other people? A couple of people? Okay, so the other ones all think it's the other one, right? It has the best definition of done. None of this. There's a lot of people not raising their hands. Why are you not raising your hand?
Definition of done is not about the outcome, but about the process.
Hmm? Yeah, maybe these are just two very different products. They're two cars, but I would hope they both had a very specific definition of done appropriate to their design, their goals, the users they're looking for, the sort of budgets that their users might have or not have, expectations and so on. That would probably have very distinct definitions of done. But I think they both have fine definitions of done because they look like good products. I hope it all drives, it works accordingly to expectations of your users, hopefully what their product owners wanted to be in the products. So it's about product qualities. So let's investigate a little bit more. So if you have a definition of done in place, what are you actually defining? So what we see all over again and again and again, a lot of people have things like this in the definition of done. Who recognizes a definition of done like this? All these sorts of testing you have to have in place. Yeah, definitions of done like this. Cool. That is how to build quality. It doesn't necessarily define quality. Suppose you're building a product, you want your product to have certain qualities, characteristics that you want your product to have. What if in software development, in your software product, you would define the qualities of your product, like a clean code base? That's a very important quality of a product. And it all thrives on software, that's very important. What if you look for valuable functions only? Meaning you're not only releasable but also valuable, meaning imagine you would have a product owner that would would free up a budget for a sprint, maybe several sprints, to remove functionality. Because it's not being used, it just sits there, it makes it a big application, your footprint is a lot bigger, it's more difficult to maintain, more complex. So getting rid of dead code in a way, that might be very, very important as a product owner. So what if your organization would have architectural guidelines and conventions in place, and you would expect your development team to actually live up to those guidelines? So it's not about the architects giving blueprints, whatever, telling them how to implement the architecture, but telling them about, hey, this is what an architecture should live up to in our company. What if you will have design guides, style guides, usability guides for your products in place, and you would have more of this in your definition of done, that maybe hopefully over time definitions of done that we see are shifting in balance from how you build quality to a definition of quality or a definition of quality. This is up to the development team to decide how to build quality. Very strange example maybe, but just having testing in your definition of done might lead to very strange question. By the end of the sprint, it has been tested, cool, so we can check off, right? It's done because it has been tested. It still has 10, 20 defects, but it has been tested, and definition done said it needs to be tested. Yeah? Just very strange example, but it seems to happen sometimes. So what if over time you would not only think in terms of how to build quality, but actually about qualities? Imagine somebody like that example, and certainly in Germany, somebody building a car, and as an organization, not having guidelines in place over what the quality of your car should be. So software is not a physical product, it's a virtual, it's a digital product, but still you can think in terms of qualities you want to see in your product. And then facilitate and allow the development team to have practices in place to actually build those qualities or live up to those qualities. Yeah. But again, it starts by having a definition of done. It's really a good start. And then evolving your definition of done to actually reflect releasable. And then maybe over time shift it towards having a definition of what the qualities you want to have in your product. It's again sort of a way of more a goal-oriented way of thinking. So quick call to action. What are you doing today? Are you having your software being coded and tested today? Is that still enough in a highly competitive market and a lot of change in the world? Or now calling it digital transformation to be more agile. Or when are you going to make sure that your software is not only releasable but can actually be released, maybe pre-deployed, whatever. So in a way, Scrum can actually embrace things like continuous deployment or continuous delivery if you want. Yeah? And when are you going to make sure that your software is also valuable, can be measured, can be operated, can be monitored and so on. But it's not just about the software. It's been developed and we've got a return sort of on development. But it's extremely difficult to maintain, keep up and running. That's not really helpful. So just call for action. So what is impeding you to go all the way? Does your Scrum Master know? Does your management know? Are you involving people? Are you sort of kicking some butts and get people working for you and resolve those very difficult problems? Yeah? So that's sort of the challenge of done. So instead of saying done, oh, that's not really an artifact. Damn, it's the core purpose of Scrum. Because, you know, it starts and ends with people. So that's what gives people this sense of professional fulfillment. Making sure that, oh, by the end of every 2-3 weeks, we've got this result out there that we can proudly show to stakeholders, that we can present to our users, maybe even have users at your sprint review. That's business agility, and it's just key if you want to employ empiricism that thrives on inspection, adaptation. Inspecting a product by the end of the sprint that is not really done is not helpful at all. You're going to do adaptations that will not help you. Even in one of the blog notes I wrote about it, I'm even saying that as long as you don't produce done software by the end of every sprint, you have no velocity. Your velocity is 0. You can fool yourself by calling out a velocity. A velocity over undone software is not meaningful at all because it doesn't help. So instead of trying to improve your velocity, try to build really done software first. Much more helpful. So that's sort of, now this requires a lot of things. Remember, it starts and ends with people. What this means, you have to invest in your people. This will only happen if you are committed, engaged, focused on building those things. This will only happen if you're really effective as a team. And how can you be effective as a team? If there's true collaboration, if people allow you to do things on yourself, you organize your own work. The role of management in Scrum is to go check in at the end of every sprint review, what has been done, what hasn't been done, how can I help you build even better software in the next sprint? So removing impediments. I hate the term agile coach because it's sort of a fraud in general. Your managers should be your agile coaches. Your managers should be the ones embracing agile thinking, agile principles, removing impediments for you, making sure that you as a team can actually produce releasable software. So it's all about people, investing in people, skills, training. So one of the hardest selling classes that we have at Scrum the Talk was the development class. And then we went out to look, why is this? Everybody wants to be a Scrum Master, but nobody wants to be just a developer. Oh, that's in a way sort of the core role of Scrum, right? It's about developing, creating products. But then we found out that, oh yeah, managers are not willing to invest in skills. You learned how to program at school, right? Why do we still have to go through training? Because technology evolves every day, because there's new frameworks, new things, new practices out there. So it's about skills, and then providing your people with practices and standards, helping them follow those practices via training and so on, giving them quality standards and guidelines. Don't build stuff that nobody's going to use, and eliminate stuff that nobody is using. Really powerful. So sort of the Agile principle: maximize the work not done. So don't build low value stuff, and if you discover it's low value, get it out. Remove impediments. And maybe at your next sprint retrospective, you want to bring up the idea: hey, what is not in our current definition of done that should be in there? What can we do about it? That sounds like a good topic to talk about at your retrospective, and get your Scrum Master to remove them. Now, what we've been talking about with a lot of companies these days is start, do something, and it seems that this idea of, who's heard about the idea of a Scrum Studio before? Anybody? Yeah, Val? No. Oh, it's a way to sort of accelerate how you do Scrum and accelerate towards creating done increments of software. What if you would sort of create a sort of container around your Scrum development effort, and make sure that as a company, as an organization, you decide that within that container we are really going to do Scrum. And meaning Scrum, it's not about utilization of people, it's not about capacity planning, it's about producing value, and it's about measuring the value of our software. It's about creating done software, releasing it, measuring the value. It's about stable product teams. It's about investing in people. It's about supporting those stable product teams with the right tools, the right infrastructure, and so on. And it seems to help at a lot of organizations that I'm talking to right now, that, if we could sort of create that sort of boundary, that sort of container around it, that just helps to communicate about it. No, this is where we do Scrum. Outside of that, you can do whatever you want, but here in the Scrum Studio, we do Scrum. And the input into a Scrum Studio is probably your product backlog and a product owner, as representing all of the needs for your product. And then within the Scrum Studio, we will build increments every 2, 3, 4 weeks. They are releasable. We can measure the value. We will give you maybe reports, but reports will not be about capacity planning, utilization of people, how much work was done in a past sprint. It will be about value. So that within the studio, people can not only just create great software, but also develop themselves. So it's a fascinating idea. So compare this to Scrum Studio to Agile Factory. What we see happening. There's a big difference in it. So think about it. So this was sort of what I wanted to talk about. Definition of done, the importance of done, how done actually is crucial, and hopefully some ideas on how you would deal with Scrum. So and a definition of done in Scrum. So that hopefully you can go home with some ideas. And maybe we're not done with Scrum, so it's only 20 years of Scrum now. Let's go for the next 20 years of Scrum. Maybe the next 20 years of Scrum should no longer be about just grasping Scrum, understanding Scrum. Maybe it should be about really enacting Scrum, living Scrum, understanding the values, understanding empiricism, understanding the need for management to embrace it, and really enact Scrum. That's a challenge for the next 20 years. And then maybe in 20 years I'll be back here and we'll see where we are. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you liked it. Have a great day today.